here and outline some of the things that I know that you are very conversant with concerning the drugs in the community, crime in the community.
I seek refuge in Allah, the creator of the universe, from Satan, as well as Satan's followers and assistants. I seek refuge in Allah from the evil of human world and others. I ask Almighty God, Allah to guide the heart, to guide the heart. As always, I pray the highest of Salam alaikum and every man, and it is keeping me unto you. As always, it's a pleasure and an honor to have an opportunity to be on a panel with brothers, such distinguished brothers, as brothers Alel Jones and Mr. Bahar, as well as you, Brother Burke. And it's always a blessing to be able to convey a message of liberation and upliftment to our people, so they will understand why they are suffering and why they're encountering many of the trials and tribulations that we are suffering in our community, and what kind of things have been put into place to put us in the context that we find ourselves today. Before I go any further, I'd like to seek the permission of my elder before going further, Brother Halil, I ask your permission to proceed. And I think that this particular expose will also give much credence to the work and the sacrifice and the struggle of our late brother Omar Ali Bey, who led many of the activities and many of the investigations and many of the programs that were dedicated to liberating our people from the scourge of drugs and the scourge of criminal activities in our community on behalf of those who we pay through our taxes, or who we have been hoodwinked into thinking have been responsible for our protection in terms of the federal government and those in the highest positions of power in this country. Just the other 2 weeks ago, I was being interviewed by a young man from the Plain Dealer about our activities as far as reducing crime and violence amongst the gangs in the greater Cleveland area, and how that work has been involving activists like ourselves and all over the greater Cleveland area as well as throughout the country, and what kind of progress and what kind of successes we have had. And in talking to this individual about that, he brought it to my attention that a former Plain Dealer reporter by the name of Chris Webb, who had been involved in investigating what was known as the Specter Gate in the greater Cleveland area a few years ago, in exposing what we now believe was federal government involvement in selling crack cocaine in the greater Cleveland area. This young man, Chris Webb, by the investigation and by his own diligence and persistence, researched this information and found out that not only did this case go to the highest levels of what we would call federal levels in the greater Cleveland area, but also in the Los Angeles area. Through his research and investigation, he found out that the CIA itself had been involved in putting together a conspiracy along with other operatives that even go all the way to the White House and then Vice President George Bush, and developing a plan that would introduce low-cost cocaine into the black community through the form of crack cocaine, which would addict thousands upon thousands of people in the inner city, would produce instant profits for these people who were selling these drugs, and these profits would be used to finance the so-called Contra Liberation War, which was being fought in Nicaragua in the 80s, a war that was put together, that was hatched in Washington, D.C. through the CIA and through George Bush to try to reinstall an oppressive dictatorship that was under the directorship of a dictator who was in Nicaragua at the time and was assassinated by the Sandinista Liberation Forces. So we see now that the death and destruction, the thousands upon thousands of crack babies, the thousands and thousands upon young black men that are in prison now because of the crack cocaine sentencing laws, the thousands of deaths that have come up out of the scourge of this crack plague, the dysfunctional families, the family destruction, the destruction of economic in the urban areas, the destruction of the very fiber, the very moral fiber of many black communities throughout urban America has been destroyed because of a plan of genocide and crimes against humanity that was developed by none other than the Vice President George Bush and many of his underhands such as Oliver North and various other people. So I think that this program will help to shed light on what the context is as to why so many things are still going on in our community. And as we get further into it, we'll find out that this is not nothing new, that the government has always been involved in bringing drugs into the black community in order to justify certain types of law enforcement action on behalf of federal officials and things of this nature. So I think that this program will help to shed light on much of this, and there will definitely have to be an investigation that was taken all the way to George Bush because he was the architect, he was the OG behind this particular conspiracy. So I wanted at this time, convey my greetings again and see to my brother Halil, who I think will give us even a greater historical context in terms of struggle with the government.
Brother Harlell Jones, you are right there in the center of a lot of drug activity down at Denise McNair, where you're the director of that their community center in around 55th and Woodland. And we know that that is a hotbed of drug activity. So I'm sure that you can weave that into whatever comments that you have to make about what is going on down there.
Yes, sir, Mr. James. Thank you for inviting me on this program here today, because I joined with you and Carlos Martin, Anthony Lahar, and also joined with the Cleveland Plain Dealer, asking for a just investigation of what the CIA did to the community. I do work on Woodland, and I've seen drugs come into our community, especially crack cocaine in the 1980s, and I saw it devastate our community. I've seen young people losing their lives. I've seen girls turning strawberries that was addicted, and they did everything imaginable up under the sun to get a $3 hit. Elderly people couldn't walk the streets. Our neighborhood got devastated. Gangs began to form because they were fighting over the turf of who's going to get the money. Guns such as 9mm and Uzis started flooding our community, and I'm talking about from coast to coast, not even Cleveland, Ohio. And then we turn around and we look and see that the government's got their dirty hand reaching down again at our community. I was, in the 1960s, involved in a government program which J. Edgar Hoover created called COINTELPRO. I got just about 10,000 documents today at the University of Akron. And this was a government conspiracy to get people. I was sent to prison. As a matter of fact, I was put on trial for life. I was facing an electric chair on a crime I didn't do. I figured today I'm completely exonerated because people had a thorough investigation. People came to my aid. We had a defense committee, and everybody pushed and pushed and pushed. And I'm here today thanks to those people. I'm asking for the same thing about this crack cocaine thing that has devastated our community. That everybody joined together, and I'm talking about European Americans, Afro Americans, everybody should try to get to the bottom of this here and let the chips fall wherever they may fall, because we've got people crying for their graves. They're crying for their graves for an investigation, and I don't think it should be a cover-up. And with good people working together, pushing the issue, and the fact that Mr. Carlos Martin has brought to the attention of our community, we're asking for that investigation, along with which I really believe that most of the groups in Cleveland would push for it. And we're not saying that we're the only ones pushing for this as Afro-Americans. We think that the European-American community should know what really happened, because one of the things they do for us, they put a thorn in our side. I've heard for years and years and years, all those Afro-Americans, that's all they want to do. Don't want to work, they want to get on drugs. And then we find out it was a deliberate plot to put these drugs in the community. And not only that, what really hurt me so bad about it, when I first read an article, I saw that these drugs went to two gangs, South Central Los Angeles. The Crips and the Bloods. I mean, I can't understand why the CIA wouldn't give it to the Ku Klux Klan, the skinheads. Why in our community again? And this is just another involvement that this government looks down on us Afro-Americans, and we've got to demand, we've got to stick together, no matter we're political, if we're Christian, Muslim, or where we are. We've got to do this for the good of the community, and we've got to let our young generation understand that we're men, we're not afraid to ask for investigation, and we're going to stand on our 2 feet to try to get to the bottom of what really happened to our community.
Well, we see it as a pattern in a long history. In a moment, we will go over here to Brother Abdul Kahar back in '72. They were doing the same thing. They were fighting against drugs in the community. But right here, as you know, we had the notorious Fechner case. Now, the Fechner case in which the police officers, to make a sting, the people out in the audience are not familiar with it, to make a drug sting, they allowed a drug dealer to sell over $1.5 million in crack cocaine, in which the police collected the money to use for a drug sting. Prior to that, Fechner claimed he had sold $20 million worth of drugs in the black community. Now, of course, this spills over to the white community too, because they have their number of drug addicts as well. A lot of them, you know, use these same drugs. But as we recall from the Fechner case, from the top level, the investigation in the federal court by the federal attorney, it was a cover-up. From the state level, from the city level, it was a cover-up. I mean, it was obvious. We fought hard. Omar Ali Bey, the Grassroots Political Action Committee, GPAC, and a number of other groups, the Coalition for a Better Life. We protested, we marched. Jim Barrett, president of GPAC, he called for a congressional investigation, and they went through all of this. The police were eventually acquitted, some of them. And this type of thing is devastating to the black community. I'm glad you gentlemen are here because you have experience, empirical experience from being out there in the community, knowing what's going on, and you have been persecuted because of your beliefs. You were unjustly imprisoned. This gentleman was kidnapped and unjustly imprisoned, which he'll tell you something about it shortly. And Khalid has suffered a certain amount of persecution in the community. But at this time, we're going over here to Brother Abdul Kahar. And we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
And we would like for you to give your views, you know, on drugs going back to 1972. I noticed here that you were an ex-Black Panther.
Yes.
And you were fighting for civil rights along with the other Black Panthers back in that era. And of course, you became subject to FBI investigations that ended up in some of your members being murdered.
Yes.
And you have a long story to tell, I guess, and we hope that you can make it as brief as possible. But go ahead and tell your story on this program.
Okay.
It is an interesting story.
Yes, sir. I'll try to make it brief to the audience and to everyone here. Assalamu alaikum. May peace and blessings be upon all of us. And this day and time, we need some peace, and we definitely need a whole lot of blessings. My story goes back with when I was a member of the Black Panther Party. I was the chairman of that organization. During that time, a drug war was being waged from the gang from in Chicago to Gary, Indiana. It was waging some war for drug purge. So we feel that that war was going to spill over into Louisville, Kentucky. So the Black Panther Party, we organized a committee called BAD. Now this is before Michael Jackson even came up with this. We organized a committee called BAD, simply means Blacks Against Drugs. And during that time, we did almost a 6-month investigation of drug dealers and policemen that were taking payoffs. During that period of time, we had the drug dealers' names, their nicknames, their homes, their tag numbers. We also had the police tag number, their car number, and we had the police by name. During that time, counterintelligence program under J. Edgar Hoover
was doing investigation of any movement, not only the national movement, the Muslim movement, but also the civil rights movement under Dr. King's leadership. J. Edgar Hoover investigated us. During that time, this program was called Counterintelligence Program. And there was a lot of informers that were working for the government during that time. The information got out that we had a file box with drug dealers' names and the policeman that was taking the payoff. In the meantime, we were educating the people against the government program methadone. They were saying methadone was the counteract to heroin, but methadone was the emperor, heroin was the king, that methadone had a greater effect on your bones and your brain than heroin did. So that was one program that we came out against, saying that the government was telling the massive people that methadone was the way to curb heroin, and it wasn't. The other thing was that I was invited to a meeting with the Crime Commission. And when I walked in, there were 12 commissioners sitting to the table, and they were all white. And they asked me, they told me that they know that I had a green box and that they would like me to work for them. And I said, I do not work for the government, I work for the people. I work for the masses of the people. Right then, I felt that I was dead. The word got out that the police department had a contract out on me, and the drug dealers had a contract out on me. I went home to visit my mother. When I came back, to make a story short, it was during the Kentucky Derby Eve. They had a party, and drug dealers and pimps came from all over the country. During that party at this hotel, which was called Last Tourist Home, 6 men and one sister, a black woman, walked in and robbed them. At that time, an informer, who I still believe today was CIA, informer, caught up with me and told me that this place was robbed and that they were looking for a man called William Dale Blakemore. And for me and William Dale Blakemore, for me to find William Dale Blakemore and find a hideout for him, not knowing that the trap was to get me and William Dale Blakemore together so they could kill both of us. But during that time, they were flashing my picture across the TV screen that they were looking for me. And I went into the country with my mother-in-law, and that time the police from the city came out to the country with the FBI, with machine gun. They surrounded the house. Happened, I ran back in the woods and jumped in a mud puddle, and that was saved me. I stayed in that mud puddle. I called after the police locked up the pamphlets that was in the house. I went down to the jail. I turned myself in, and they put me on the line up there. A pimp that pointed me out, a drug dealer that pointed me out, and a prostitute that pointed me out. And I said, and I turned and told the other pamphlets, I said, well, look, man, they say that I did it, so y'all can go. And they say, no, it's a package. I was bond with $57,500. Then they planted a sister in the courtroom with a gun. This is all police now. And the buzzer went off, and then they took out bond, and they gave us no bond. I ended up beating the case because many of the people that say they were robbed was afraid to come because they had to explain where they were getting their money from. You know, so they took that as a loss. A year later, I was kidnapped by the FOP, which were all white. They tried to get the African American police lead.
You may explain what the FOP is.
Fraternity Order of Police. And they carry a lot of power, even in Cleveland. They came to get me one night around 12 o'clock, and their excuse was they said I shot at my wife, which wasn't true. And then they said that we heard you storing guns for the Black Panther Party, which I did have guns, and my guns were legal. I was given a trial in the Mission Institution. I was held there for 60 days. I was interrogated every morning by a South Korean female, and the only thing she would say, why you hate white people? And I said, I don't hate white people. Then she would say, why you have all those guns? I say that I like hunting. She said, don't you know Jesus loves you? And that was all. I was taking them upstairs, and then they finally gave me shot sheet. But what got me out of there was a white doctor that recognized me. And he brought a tape recorder, and I told him the whole story, how I was kidnapped and brought there, and I held against my will. And he took it to a black radio station called WLOU, and because I had a strong base within the community, massive people supported our anti-drug movement. And when they played it, the massive people came out to the institution, got me out of there, and the doctor wrote a confession and a statement that there wasn't nothing wrong with me when I came there, but that he was following that order that was given by the FOP. But to make a story short, seeing what is happening now is hurt.
because I risked my life, my family life, and many of my comrades and brothers risked their life. And now seeing that the government continues that madness by flooding the community. And I share this with the audience, and I know that many of y'all have heard it said before. Even the youngest drug opponents, we don't own no airplanes. We don't own no ship. The common man always say that on the street corner. And so now the CIA coming out telling us that you were right. We the one bringing it in here. We the one that controlling it. We the one that setting up these game walls. We the one that are funding the control to try to establish a promotion against the Nicaraguan people, the freedom fighters. And at the same time, they waging war over there, the CIA, and waging war here. And that's what Brother Collins was talking about. We have a game war here in the government.
Well, would you say that what they did to you was a form of brainwashing? They were trying to brainwash you into using you in some way as an informer or something like that. I mean, the way that they interrogated you, held you incommunicado in a situation like that, it sounds like the old-fashioned brainwashing or interrogation.
It was, let me just make it simple. It was fascism.
Yeah, well, it was brainwashing. And pretty soon you will sympathize with your oppressor, you know, if they continue to...
well,
you're weak, but you're a strong brother, and you were able to resist that.